import parts 3 through 5 that we created last time. Let's left click on insert. Let's scroll down here and let's import 3, parts 4, and parts 5. Alright, and we can move these around. Let's bring these over here. Click on that. Let's go to top view. Let's just kind of move all of this stuff around at one time. Left click on the check mark and let's go back to front view. Alright, so this is our motor mount. That should be 16 inches long. So just shorter than the swing arm. Let's go ahead and start with the motor mount first. Spinning the wheel. Now I'm holding the wheel down. I'm going to move that back to center. Let's left click on this and let's rotate this 90 degrees. So this is the motor mount. Alright, there we are, 90. Let's go back to top view. We'll bring it in so that it just covers the swing arm tube. There we go. Now let's go back over here on the cube, left click on front. Let's left click on this one. Let's drag that across. That's good. Let's drag that right around there. Now, let's go left view. Let's click on that and let's bring it down and align it. That looks good. So we need another one of these. A couple different ways you can do this. We can come over and right click here on the assembly view, instances. We could go copy, paste. Alright, so now I brought another motor mount in and you noticed it linked it right below. Alright, so now I'm going to bring this one down. I'm going to move it over. So all I'm doing is holding down the left mouse button when I move it. So left click on the cube, left click again where it says left. Let's bring this in. We'll eventually make sure all of these align perfectly. We'll use a fastener eventually. Right now we're just going to do this by hand. So those are lining up. Let's go ahead. This doesn't have to be exact right now. We'll measure the distance. We'll just eyeball it right now and get it assembled. Let's go left click. Let's bring this up. So this is going to be the harness connection and we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. Perfect. So left click again, we're going to drag this one up. We'll insert it here. On the cube. Let's bring this over. Oops, I selected the wrong one. So click on this arrow here, bring that over. Line that up. I'm just going to take the wheel and scroll in. Let's go back to top view. Yep, that looks lined up. So I'm just going to line it up. There we go. Looks pretty good there. So we're going to do the same thing we did before. Let's go to front view. instead of coming over here, because this is going to be part 3, let's right click on that. Let's go copy part 3. Now let's go paste part 3. So I pasted it in that location, left click, and then drag it over. Just going to bring it where it just comes out just a little bit. On the edge of the cube, left click on right. Oops. Let's click on that part again. I'm going to zoom in with the wheel, the mouse wheel, holding it down to drag it around. There, that looks centered up fairly well. Let's look at it from the top. Left click again. So now, let's go back to front view. Let's take the top harness and spar connection. Let's bring it up. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. Left click on it again. Bring it over. We can kind of line it up because it makes it see through. Now let's go back to top. Let's bring this together since we're lined up. That looks good. And then I want to go, hang on, I'm going to have to go back to isometric view. So I want to highlight that, and I want to grab this one at the top, and I want to rotate that. We may have to reposition it because our spar is not going to go straight up, but it's going to go up at an angle. Let's go back to top view, and let's drag that back in. And we'll get this exact on the angle we need once we get closer to assembling the real world. We'll have a better idea of what angle we want. Alright, that looks pretty good. That's as far as we need to go today. And that is just using just the basic navigation of assembly. This is only the second time we've used assembly view, and we'll start to add other tools on later on, but I wanted to start off really basic at first right now. You can kind of see why we color coded things so we can tell the difference between the different parts. It just makes it easy to see what goes with what part and to keep everything organized. So let's go back to isometric view, and we will stop there. So our next step is we'll print the parts off, and then we'll do a real world assembly. So this is the Bambu Lab slicer. It's okay if you don't have this 3D printer. It'll have similar settings. Let's start new project. I'm gonna left click and hold down the left button. That allows me to move this around. The wheel allows me to scroll in and out, and then if I right click, I can and hold down the right button on the mouse, I can move this around. I'm going to left click on these informational buttons. I'm using the PLA plate because I'm using PLA. I'm using generic PLA, and you could select from here and choose what you're using. So all these settings will stay the same. I don't really change anything like layer height, first layer height, because I'm just creating models. They don't have to be super strong. But the big takeaway is, what am I printing with? I didn't explain this last time. I'm using PLA. Pretty cheap to buy, pretty easy to use. PETG would be printed, and nylon would be printed on the other side of the Bambu Labs plate. It doesn't show it here, but you would flip it over for that style of printer. Let's go ahead and import our files that we need to print. Let's go up here to File, left click on File, go to Import, left click on that and import 3MF STL, because these are STL files. Let's go to where we saved it at. So here are our three. I'm just going to highlight all three and bring them in at the same time. And then open. I'm not bringing these in as a pre-assembled part. So these are not interconnected. We're going to print these separately and assemble by hand. So let's hit no. So I'll left click. Now you'll notice I get some error messages and some warnings because these are way larger than the print area. So I can do about 10 inches cubed on here, 256 millimeters I believe. So let's just separate these first and place them on the build plate. So I left click on that part and I drag it away. Left click on this part, you notice it just highlights this one. I'm going to left click and bring it over here. I'm going to left click here and bring this one down. Now, notice I'm not taking that all the way to the edge, and that's on purpose because when the 3D printer prints, it's going to do some test prints on the outside to make sure everything's adhering, and I don't want these parts to get in the way of that. Now let's resize. So I'm going to left click on this. I'm going to go up here to scale. And I'm going to left click here on the X. It'll do the same for the Y and the Z because we're keeping a uniform scale. And I hit enter. So now that's half the size that it would be in real life. I'm going to left click on this one. I'm going to do the same thing. Just to get repetition here, plus to print it off I have to. I'll move that over here. I'm going to left click on this and go back to scale, go to 50. So instead of going back through and scaling these out again, because I need two of these and two of these to print, I'm going to left click and turn this so that you can see kind of top view. So I've got this one highlighted. If you didn't highlight it, left click on that. Once it's highlighted, right click and go clone. So it keeps the scaling, and now it's going to clone that part. So left click, then right click, clone, hit OK, then I'll drag that over. I only need one of these. Now I've already tested these out, so I know there's nothing that I really need to change. So you'll notice down here, this left, kind of mid left-hand side, that was quality, strength, you can adjust all that. I just keep the default settings. Supports are about all I ever change. It may suggest that these need supports because we have these small holes here. Anytime you have something that has a hole in it, it often, especially if it has to print over the top of it and go up, it'll suggest supports. I know it doesn't need it, so I'm not going to bother with that. But if you did or wanted to do supports, you would left click. I use just normal. You'll see tree, normal, manual, tree, manual. If I do use supports, I normally only use auto, normal, auto. Now I'm going to go up here right next to prepare and hit preview. This is where it'll give you your warnings. If you need supports, it'll tell you or suggest supports, and that's what it did here. I know I don't need it. I know what it's talking about. It's for these motor mounts that have holes in the center, and even this object here has a hole in the center, so it's suggesting for parts 4, parts 5 that we do supports. We don't need that. Now let me close that out. This is where I was telling you it would do a test print. Right here, you see those lines? I don't want my parts over that. It's okay if this touches. So it's going to print out a little surface just to keep these cylinders attached to the build plate. Because if it didn't, they could shake loose and then it messes up the print. This doesn't need it. It's so small, it's not going to get a lot of movement. But these are so tall that this printer is so fast, it might move those parts a little bit. And so to prevent those from breaking loose, we've got those here. So I'm going to left click, I'm going to drag that around and make sure none of that overlaps. This does. See how that overlaps there? So I'm going to go back to prepare, Not that it would cause a big issue, but I don't want to take the chance. Now I'm just going to move those over. I have had it overlapped and it didn't cause it to print over it. But I just don't want to take a chance, and I don't need it to be in that location. So we hit preview again. It'll give you all the, there we go. So we're good. We're not touching anything here where it's going to do that test print. All right, so it gives you how long it's going to take. So 2 hours and 51 minutes. It's going to cost you about 50 cents. So 0.53 in cost of filament to do this. And then you go left click print plate. I'm on a computer where I'm not connected to my printer, but your printer would show up here. It shows that I'm using that generic PLA, and then I would send to print. Once that prints off, we'll go through the same process we did last time. Assemble it in computer view, print it off, and then after we print, then we'll do a real world assembly. Okay. 3D prints are done. So we'll take these off. You can see that one kind of messed up at first, but it corrected itself. We'll clean those threads up. So that's what keeps it on the build plate. We'll take this. We'll clean all of these off. So all the test pieces it ran. You got to be careful, don't get that underneath your fingernail. So these are, those little strips there can break and get right up underneath your fingernail. I've had that happen before. All right, so now we'll wash this down. We'll do it later. I'm going to put it back in here, but before the next print, we'll wash it down. We'll put some more glue on. Die set. So we can use that to clean the threads of this. Now it's got something that it fits down into, but for this, since it's not metal, I don't really need it. And I can use it to clean up the threads. You just want to make sure that they're even so you don't start making new threads. When you place that on there, I'm going to use my right hand. So you can run that down, and that'll clean up those threads too. We made these 0.73. But I'm just going to clean up the ends real quick and see how well that fits in without doing too much cleaning. Feels like it's easier to thread on than the other one because it's smaller. But let's just see. Talking about, like, if these were connected, the reason we made one side longer is so we can thread these all the way down. And you'll be able to turn this a little bit, and then you could pull it out. Now this is the center one I left threaded down. Put these two in first. Left about the width of this tube hanging out. Ran those in. Ran this one down until it was about even on both sides, because this is what the swing arms are going to go into. And just like I left this one out, I'm going to run it down and connect it to that harness and spar connection. And then I can center this up by moving it up and down until I get it centered. Run that down some more. All right, that looks good on that side. And then I can run this down. And it doesn't have to be exact right now. Just getting it assembled so we can make sure all the parts are fitting. The next piece we're going to make is the bottom half of this front frame tube that's going to go down. We'll do that first before we start working on the back segments. We may do the next piece that comes down so we can get the appropriate length here on the front side of the tube. We might even make these base tubes that come out.